So it's been a while since the release of Spider-Man No Way Home, and ever since it came out I kept thinking to myself, wow, this movie's so good, and also I have to make a video about this. But then after that I kept saying things like, Obama showing up in the third act is a bit unnecessary. But after all those thoughts that I had from here to there and to here again, I said to myself, alright, I want to rank these movies. If you guys have been with my channel for a while now, it's no surprise that I'm a bit of a Spider-Man fanatic. Spider-Man has had an illustrious journey in either a good way or the not good way. So without further ado, let's talk about every Spider-Man movie ranked from worst to best. Let's get into it. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. What did you expect? This is one of those movies that if you showed me a clip of it, and then another, and another, and another, I would think this is fine. But the issue is, this is a movie that when combined is one of the messiest films I have ever seen.
Have you been there?
Oh, I don't know.
It's mind-blowing.
Oh, that place on 6, I know, you love it there.
He wasn't even trying to hide his British accent there. There was literally a scene where Peter throws a calculator where inside are these gold doubloons, and then when he puts them in the station, a train comes out of the literal ground. So that's where we're at. Also, when did Peter even mention the existence of Harry in the first one? And also, why does Harry look like he came straight out of an anime? Like Dane DeHaan in this movie, did you really care to see this guy turn into the Green Goblin? I mean, who cares? Especially when we do eventually see him as the Green Goblin, which I mean, as people have said before me, looks absolutely hideous. Now I completely understand the Power Rangers suit in the Raimi movies because, wow.
You were my friend, and you betrayed me!
Also, Jamie Foxx's Electro not only is so underutilized, but his recurring score is one of the funniest things I have ever heard. It's not even the score, it's the way they place it that makes it hilarious. I mean, imagine if Tony Stark's death was like this. Ladies and gentlemen, it just so happens that I made that movie even better. Also, if you really think about it, Electro becomes evil not because he wanted to or anything, but a lot of it was the people that were literally terrorizing him throughout the entire sequence. If anything, they're the real villains. My homie just wanted to eat his birthday cake in peace. Also, why are these New Yorkers watching these fights take place? This isn't New Year's Eve. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean this movie is all bad. I mean, the actors are clearly trying. There are some cool action scenes, some funny jokes, and a few amazing shots. But honestly, to narrow it down, the only and major issue with this movie is the writing. If anything, it felt like Sony was trying to bite off more than they can chew, and none of this embodies that more than, of course, the death of Gwen Stacy, which again, if you see this clip, individually, it's very well done. But the problem is, it feels so empty and unwarranted. In the comic, this happened over a long building rivalry. Like, it wasn't done by a villain that popped up in the last 20 minutes, it was done by a villain that's been established and very applicable to the story for some period of time. So when it did happen, it felt like the final explosion, and it was just so indelibly daunting. But here, the first thought that came into my head was, we're here already? This movie, in my opinion, just got too crowded, couldn't convey its ideas very well, and on top of that, it felt like a really bad commercial for movies that didn't and probably won't exist. But hey, even though the movie was supposed to be the big one, the trailblazer that launched a million universes, at least we got Paul Giamatti acting like Gru from Despicable Me for a few minutes and Tom Hardy burping in Venom. Also, is that Ryan Howard?
Look at little Goblin Jr. Gonna cry?
Spider-Man 3. Look guys, unironically, this movie is bad. It's messy, its themes and ideas finish quicker than Venom's character development, but ironically, this is one of the funniest movies that I've ever seen.
They love me.
This movie was like my Phantom Menace. It takes all the corny, fluffy, almost light tone covered with the bowl of insanity the first two had and just fully dips itself into it. Bully Maguire is one of the best things to happen to meme culture since Rick Ashley. Some of the plots and ideas, to be fair, are done well for the most part. I mean, Mary Jane, for example, was done incredibly well in this one. Like, they finally have a real relationship, and Kristen Dunst does a phenomenal job and is finally utilized a lot better than in the previous two films, and not whatever preschool crap this was.
You're gonna light up Broadway.
And that Sandman scene. I mean, I can analyze the sheer excellence of this moment, but there's a ton of channels that have done it and would probably do it better. So all I'll say is that the birth of Sandman really deserves all the praise it gets. We also have Amnesia Harry, which is a delight.
I know that face.
James Franco, for whatever reason, was just eating this performance up, and it's just so enjoyable. But honestly, in retrospect, they did his character dirty, but I don't care because I was laughing so hard. And speaking of laughing so hard, we obviously have to talk about the dance. Because let's be real, this is now a piece of cinema history. For those who don't really understand this scene and criticize it, it's actually unironically genius. As Connor said, it amplifies certain characteristics of its host, and Peter's characteristic that was amplified was his awkwardness. But the thing is, the symbiote decides to amplify his resilience towards the embarrassment of his awkwardness as well. So in a way, this conceptually was kind of brilliant. And then we have Venom. Why? The funny thing is, Topher Grace is not a bad Eddie Brock, but the moment Venom pops up, I don't actually know why Sony thought this was a good idea.
I like being bad. It makes me happy.
Honestly, this movie is just the right amount of insanity. The good scenes I like watching again do admittedly make it more annoying when it goes back to being odd and unfocused. As I've said before in many videos, tone and expectations can really affect how one enjoys a movie. Spider-Man 3 doesn't start exactly how it ends and doesn't build up well enough to justify the conclusion. But when you have scenes like Peter shouting,
"You'll get your rent when you fix this damn door!"
or killing the Sandman being mixed with the dance scene and Topher Grace's awkward performance,
I'm thinking humiliation. Kind of like how you humiliated me.
it's no wonder why people felt overwhelmed and confused when walking out. But if I were to pick which movie to watch, either The Amazing Spider-Man 2 or this movie, I would pick this in a heartbeat. And as a licensed memologist, I can wholeheartedly say this movie is sacred and needs to be kept in our conservatory for future studies.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Spider-Man, the film that changed people's perceptions about superhero movies. The film that still to this day holds up as one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. I think it's alright. Honestly, a lot of the movie is kinda just very standard and formulaic. I always found it very unsettling that in the Raimi films he doesn't make web shooters, it's just coincidentally coming out of his wrist. And I'm sorry, with that kind of logic, shouldn't it come out from other places? Hashtag no way home joke. But the biggest thing to compliment about this film is that the pacing and storytelling is actually really good. Willem Dafoe will always be the definitive Green Goblin to me. And yeah, the suit looks really goofy, but what can you do in a time where the CG would have made him look just as terrible as the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Green Goblin? Think about that. I honestly kind of adore the thematic differences between both Norman and Peter. It revolves around two people using their newfound power for completely different reasons. Peter to help those in need, and Norman to get revenge. The Goblin is like a pure villainous force who believes that with great power you should be able to get what you want. He successfully convinces Norman about this, yet unsuccessfully convinces Peter, whose convictions to his late uncle's words remain strong, which is show an honest and well-meaning person and put them into situations that tempt them to betray their morals and ideals. And the festival scene, I mean, it's literally a masterpiece. Everything about it is absolute comedic gold. It's also pretty clear that this movie was the goofiest thing to put on film in 2002. Like, the climax of the film is the villain literally holding the love interest in one hand and a metal box of children in another.
This is why only fools are heroes. Because you never know when some lunatic will come along with the sadistic choice. Let die the woman you love, or suffer the little children.
And by the way, J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, you know those times when you see a comic book character come to life and you're like, this is the exact voice and appearance that I think a guy like this would sound and appear like? Yeah, that's Simmons in this role, which in my eyes is a whole new level of perfect casting. Not only is his performance just great, but it's like his scenes have a completely different writing staff. They're just so legitimately funny.
Tomorrow morning, Spider-Man, page 1 with a decent picture this time. Move Conway to page 7.
There's a problem with page 7.
And make it page 8 and give him 10% off. And make it 5%.
That can't be done.
Get out of here!
This was the movie that arguably made the biggest impact in getting comic book films going again. Overall not fantastic, but a good beginning for what's to come.
Poor Peter Parker.
The Amazing Spider-Man. Now I have a bit of a history with this movie. For one, this was the first analysis review I've ever made and published on YouTube, and then I gladly deleted it because of how much it sucked and the copyright claims it had. I also talked about it in a video I made called 10 Movies I Like But Everyone Else Hates, so it's not shocking that I do like this movie, even though there's a lot holding it back. For one, the lizard, and I will say this till the day I die, looks like a Goomba from the Super Mario Bros. Movie. And the funny thing is, Kurt Connors has good motivation and build up until he becomes the lizard, whose motivation is to turn other people into lizards because that's very compelling in a Spider-Man movie. This movie sometimes feels like it forgets some of its plot lines and conflicts, like it sometimes feels like it's just drifting off. For one, the movie seems like it was trying so hard to be different, especially with the great power line. Just check out how they phrase it.
He believed that if you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility.
Also, who cares about Peter Parker's parents? I mean, this is a whole new level of trying to be different. I mean, I'm sorry, that really didn't need to be mentioned in this iteration. But the movie shines because of how much more realistic it is. Like Andrew Garfield, I mean, this guy is the definition of underrated and clearly a huge fan of lasagna.
I get the reference, and I don't appreciate it.
Sure, his suit in this film looks like a basketball, but for me, I'll just say it, I felt like Andrew was the best Spider-Man on the big screen. Not Spider-Dweeb, not Spider-Boy, but Spider-Man. Like I wanted to be that Spider-Man. His Peter Parker is another story, because it's kind of inconsistent, where I love him and then I think he's meh. Like honestly, he just doesn't look like he's in high school. This is Riverdale obvious. But the thing they nailed is he's funny, a little awkward at times, yet always tries to intuitively keep a smile on his face no matter what is at stake. A great example is when Uncle Ben and Aunt May are talking about his father and Peter says,
Yeah, I know.
Just the way he said, yeah, I know. Literally all the layers of him really attempting to not break out sobbing, so he makes a joke to lighten that clearly very debilitating tension that he's so desperately feeling. This right there encapsulates why Andrew Garfield was just so great, yet so complex, charismatic, and completely underappreciated. And his relationship with Gwen is just adorable. Gwen is not a princess that needs to be saved like some other people I know. Peter and Gwen both work together, and work well together. And I just have to say this, and you can all fight me in the comments, but of all of Spider-Man's love interests like Mary Jane, Liz Allen, Felicia Hardy, Gwen Stacy is my favorite, hands down. Emma Stone just absolutely nailed this role and gave us a whole new level to Gwen Stacy that I never thought anybody could bring. So yeah, The Amazing Spider-Man is a movie I like a lot. Does it have problems? Sure, but love it or hate it, the Stan Lee cameo was the best part of the movie.
Excuse me, sir! I can help! Let me help! I'm really strong and I'm sticky!
Spider-Man Far From Home is one of those movies that slowly after time gets a little worse the more and more I see it. Maybe it's because I've seen so many MCU movies, or maybe it's because my heart is made of whatever Tony Stark had, but I still really like this movie. Both Tom Holland and Zendaya have great chemistry, there's a lot of really funny jokes.
That's what it said on the news. and the news never lies.
I love the way they introduced the idea of the blip and how some people aged during those 5 years and some people didn't. Like, I thought that was brilliant. Jake Gyllenhaal is just amazing as Mysterio. Like, the entire illusion scene is really something. If you were to ask what are some of the best Spider-Man movies on film, this is definitely one of them. It's just so well presented. Mysterio as a villain is genuinely terrifying. He's not stupid, he's not cocky, he's not unsure of himself, and even upon losing, he screwed up Peter's life. Like, even when the illusion was over, can you really say with certainty that it was over? He took all of Peter's weaknesses and insecurities and just used them against him. And of course, the end credit scene that was probably one of the best MCU cliffhangers ever. But that's honestly what this movie felt like. It's still good, but it felt like a little movie to enjoy and salivate, but not appetize for the big meal. I mean, this movie was literally after Avengers Endgame, MCU's literal magnum opus. So having a small little movie is alright, but in the long run, it might be forgotten as a good film, but not really one of their best and so avant-garde. It's kind of like the Luca of Spider-Man movies. Pretty cute and something that I'd love to watch a few more times in my life, but nothing really huge to write home about. The only thing I have left to say is that I can't even imagine what Mysterio could do if he had the Reality Stone. Like, whoa.
Pizza time.
Spider-Man 2. I really like this movie. Is it as many people consider as one of the best, if not the best superhero movie of all time? In my opinion, no. It can be a little too campy at times, and there were some plot lines that I felt could have been cut or just utilized better. But honestly, the first thing you notice about this movie is that it just flows better. Not only is the opening to the film just fantastic, with the artwork and the Danny Elfman score, it's just truly superior, like the best Spider-Man opening I've ever seen. But I just love the story in this one because I feel like of all the movies in the Raimi trilogy, this one really gets Spider-Man, or better yet, it gets Peter Parker. Peter went through so much in this movie. He had trouble paying the bills, was on the verge of failing his classes, not being homeless, which will probably be the title for the 4th MCU Spider-Man movie. The Daily Bugle constantly painting him as the villain, his best friend hating him, the love of his life getting married to someone else specifically.
My son, the astronaut.
And most of all, him still feeling guilty for what happened to Uncle Ben. This is why Spider-Man is so emotionally close to all of us, and I feel like the one scene that can fully paint the picture entirely is the train sequence. I mean, if this moment had a word to be known for, it would be epic. Alfred Molina really sold it as Doc Ock. Apart from Norman and Peter, both Otto and Peter have more thematic similarities. Before the accident, Otto tells Peter that intelligence is a gift to be used for the good of mankind. But this augmented moral that he's always stuck to is pushed to the wayside when the arms take control and Peter, unable to handle the weight that being Spider-Man has on his personal life, and starts to reject it too. This movie is so much deeper than I initially thought it was, and I mean so much deeper.
Whoa! He stole that guy's pizza!
Spider-Man was going through a rough time. He was losing his powers, the city was being unappreciative of his efforts, and he was losing his desire of being Spider-Man altogether. But he was put into a situation where he had to step up, and he took it without any hesitation. He saved all those people on the train, even after all their doubts, and when they lifted him to safety, he finally got the recognition and love he felt like he deserved for so long. The people loved him, and they loved him enough to never reveal his identity. This was one of the most heroic acts in superhero movie history. This was not stopping a doomsday weapon, this was not fighting a cosmic being, this was just a train full of people, and he put himself on the line to make sure they made it alive. This represents one of my favorite versions of the hero's tale. Only in giving up the thing that he wants the most can the hero actually attain it. It's a beautifully profound idea, and you see it in other stories like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Harry can only get the stone by denying the power that it would grant him. Sometimes in life, the only way to have love, wealth, or power is not to seek it directly, but to have it occur as a natural consequence of pursuing the truest version of yourself. You let go of the outcome without consideration for it. In doing so, you make the outcome more likely. Anyway, I've been talking about this movie for a while now, so let's get to the top 3.
Do you lay eggs?
What? No.
Spider-Man Homecoming can be summed up in one word: watchable. This is probably the most times I've actually seen a movie. Period. The Vulture is one of the best MCU villains I have ever seen. Michael Keaton is just pitch perfect. I love the fact that he's a normal guy that's trying to make a living, but the world is telling him not. So of course he has to fight for himself, and when you see that scene when he confronts Peter in the car, you feel that raw, visceral tension with the creepy smile where it feels like your heart's about to drop in any second.
He must be Peter.
This scene is a masterpiece of psychological positioning. The way that the situation creates suspense, including the way they put the shadow of the green light onto Michael Keaton's face with his eyes wide and tone lowered, is just incredibly perfect. I mean, imagine if Peter wasn't actually Spider-Man and he was just talking to some innocent teenager. Like, this would have been really terrifying.
I'll kill you and everybody you love.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go, sir, please.
But even the enriching moment of wallowing despair that Peter had to endure when stuck under those rocks, and he starts shouting for help because he feels helpless, but then realizing that there's no one to help him but himself. So he shouts,
Come on, Peter. Come on, Spider-Man. Come on, Spider-Man. Come on, Spider-Man. Oh, come on, Spider-Man!
This is the moment where I felt so moved. This scene perfectly captured that while he is Spider-Man, he is also still a kid. Even with his abilities, he still has the natural fears and doubts that kids go through as they grow up. I also feel like this truly shows more of Tom Holland's acting abilities than usual. Since his character is so normally pure and full of childlike energy, it's so rare to see him vulnerable. This scene made me learn that at some point in our lives, we just have to rely on our own strengths by acknowledging weaknesses to accomplish something. This is Spider-Man to me. This scene fully maintained the essence of the character to me. If I had any issues with the film, I'd say the over-reliance on the MCU can be a little obnoxious. And honestly, the action scene in the end wasn't bad or anything, it's just the fact that I felt like I was having epilepsy while watching it. But either way, this movie is just a triumph. Say all you want about how much of the grand scale and epicness it sometimes lacks, because some of the best Spider-Man stories are just him doing the right thing and nothing else. Sometimes movies can be fun and enjoyable and not grand and epic. You ever think about that?
Hello, Peter.
Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, if you want a more in-depth review about my thoughts, feel free to check it out. But if you have seen the video, my opinion clearly hasn't changed. This movie is a miracle. I've probably seen this movie 3 times so far, and I wouldn't hesitate to watch it a 4th. Who would have thought we'd get to see a movie that not only celebrated these 3 generations of films that I've seen throughout my childhood and youth, but the fact that this movie celebrated Peter Parker as a character, and not just one Peter Parker. I mean, if I had to give any criticisms, I'd say that some of the CG looks a little unfinished, and occasionally some plot lines don't make sense, but the stuff that works in this movie works so unbelievably well that it just doesn't matter. The reason this movie is so great is because while putting all the villains and Tobey and Andrew in it are definitely fan service, they're actually an integral part of the story and help develop Tom Holland's Spidey. I think the first 2 movies being more like a John Hughes movie, like very light-hearted with very small stakes, makes No Way Home's darker tone and bittersweet ending much more impactful. I mean, I made a video called Spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home a while back, and surprisingly, I wasn't too far off. Like Tobey and Andrew being in the movie, the multiverse happening, somebody dying in the movie, Deadpool showing up in the movie.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
This movie is just everything I want a live-action Spider-Man movie to be, and so much more. And if No Way Home taught us anything, it's that Andrew Garfield, when he has good material to work with, is a brilliant Spider-Man. Can you guys just give us The Amazing Spider-Man 3? I'm begging you.
How many more Spider people are there?
Save it for Comic-Con.
What's Comic-Con?
Alright, let's do this one last time. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is everything a Spider-Man movie should be. Again, if you want a more in-depth analysis, feel free to check it out. But this is a Spider-Man movie that does everything right. This movie has animation that actually made me feel like film as a whole was moving forward in a new artistic direction. It felt like artists were actually allowed to be artists, unconstrained for once. It had soul. I was so amazed with Miles swinging through the building after his leap of faith. I got to relate to Miles in a way I never saw before, where I saw the struggle of trying to find yourself as everything around you tells you to conform to society and other people. I honestly don't know how to explain this masterpiece in simple words, because when you watch it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Everything will go beyond your expectations, and I really hope they can keep this level of greatness in the future.
Hey, are these your drawings?
What? No,
Oh,
no.
good.
Hey.
Spider-Man is one of the greatest superheroes of all time. Peter Parker's story saved my life as a kid in ways that I can attempt to describe. Peter Parker to me was the everyman, looking out for the little guy while being a little guy himself. His naivete is endearing, his drive is admirable, his ideals are rock solid. He could be anyone underneath the mask. And even though while he is larger than life, his problems are grounded in reality, showing how difficult it is to make the right choice and thrusting the consequences along with it. He deals with these issues realistically, and that really inspired me. And these movies, even at their worst, all have that ideation interwoven somehow and show that with great power comes great responsibility. Spider-Man will always be that voice of pride, modesty, the embodiment of a hero that transcends growth from trauma. It's a journey about a boy becoming a man and accepting who he is and the weight of his responsibility.